The Vera Thomas Show. The Vera Thomas Show. The Vera Thomas Show. The Vera Thomas Show. Let's talk about it. 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 On the Vera Thomas Show. Let's talk about it. Yeah.
I had to do some psychological work on myself that I'm good enough. I have my own talents and abilities. I have my own capacity for independent thought and for independent living. And therefore, I'm going to flex this muscle. I'm going to build it because I can do it. And so it takes a lot of rethinking of the psychology of your identity. And you have to keep talking yourself into it. And it doesn't help that you're going to meet people who don't know that you have separated or broken up, and they're going to ask for John or they're going to ask for Mary. And you sometimes have to keep repeating this story.
Sometimes you have to keep repeating the story when you have to be resilient. I am so excited about my guest tonight, Clover Johnston. How are you today?
I am doing great. Thanks, Vera.
Well, I am just honored that you're here, and let me tell the audience a little bit about you. She is a powerful voice of resilience, faith, and transformation for women navigating one of life's hardest seasons, divorce and co parenting. Clover Taylor Johnson is a faith filled co parenting coach, mother of three adult daughters, and founder of the Co Parent Transformation Accelerator program. Clover's journey began in the most unimaginable way, abandoned by her husband just weeks after giving birth to her second daughter. In the immediate aftermath of a catastrophic tropical cyclone, left initially without financial or emotional support, she faced an overwhelming reality but chose healing over bitterness, faith over fear, and agency over victimhood. Now, Clover helps women who are co-parenting with emotional available wait, who are co-parenting with emotionally unavailable partners, especially those grieving a marriage that ended without validation or closure. Her work gives voice to ambiguous and disenfranchised grief while offering both emotional healing and practical tools. She's a contributing author of an anthology entitled Unsilenced Voices, volume number 4, to be published in March. Congratulations on that. Her chapter is entitled From Betrayal to Breakthrough. She's currently writing her personal memoir. Clover's motto says it all. It's hard to be fake fruitful while you're holding on to what's hurtful. And today, she's here to help you release the pain and step into your power. Yes. Well, I am just excited that you're here. And I'm going to ask you to share a little bit about your childhood and what was it like and how did it impact you and how you're living today.
Okay, thank you for asking that. Okay, so I had a fantastic childhood. So I was raised by two parents who loved me. And I know they loved me. And I did not grow up in the now environment where people have to be telling their kids every day how much they love them, right? Like as a constant reassurance. The ethos in my home told me that I was loved. There was cooperation between my parents who were they were married, they were people of faith, they served their family first and the extended family and then community. So I saw authentic people showing up every day despite the challenges, showing up for family, showing up for extended family, showing up for friends and for their wider community. My mother was an elementary school teacher, and so she had holidays, and those holidays were dedicated to us. Fortunately for us, we lived by the beach. So our fun times were about beach activities. And especially in the summer, those were almost daily. And we would go to the beach for a good portion of the morning. My mom would come home and she would cook our favorite meals because she loved to cook. Um, we would those were the days on board games. So we would play Ludo, Snakes and Ladders, Dominoes, because we're Jamaican. So we had a lot of fun time and at home fun, right? That was the time you had fun at home as a family. And we would have also family trips, and the family trips were to visit other family members. And other family members would come to visit us and overnight because we were the fun family. We lived by the beach. My mom
Wow.
baking and she was always cooking. And because we lived by the beach, we got fresh seafood. So whenever family came, they were expecting fresh seafood, Jamaican escovitch fish. So it was a time of enormous bonding and affection and, you know, family togetherness. And as I said, not just immediate family, but extended family. So that for me set the groundwork and the template of how I expected um, the childhood of my children to unfold in that same family warmth, enveloped in that same family warmth, and being able to have a lot of activities with them and a lot of fun time. So
That's
my parents were also people of faith. So Sunday school, Catholic church in the morning, Sunday school after church. And there was a Salvation Army Sunday school because my father worked on a sugar estate. So we would have that in the evenings as well. So faith
that,
and family, that was what my childhood was about.
that is absolutely beautiful. And the fact that you incorporate, I think one of the things that's lacking today is that lack of that spiritual and that faith based in the home. Now, we're here today because we're talking about co-parenting. So, can you share with us your story of your marriage now, especially given that you had such a wonderful childhood with both parents in the home? I'm sure you did not expect to encounter the experience that you had. So, can you kind of share with our audience what happened and a couple of things. What happened? How did it impact you? And what impact did it have on your children?
Okay, so I had been married, thinking probably just about approaching 5 years.
Okay.
And I was pregnant, and my husband had lost his job about 4 months before I was due to give birth. And he was someone who was his identity was very much wrapped up, and I guess he's not that's not peculiar to him. His identity was very much wrapped up in his job and in the title that came with that job. And he was made redundant about 4 to 5 months. I had baby in August, and I think he was made redundant around the April. And he had always wanted to be a lead entrepreneur. He had returned from Canada, hoping to become a significant Blue Mountain coffee farmer. And for those anybody listening, you probably know that Blue Mountain Coffee is a signature coffee brand of Jamaica. So he had family, grandparents who had land in the Blue Mountain range. So he had this dream of becoming a coffee farmer and exporter. And I think the disappointment of losing his job sort of refocused him to this ideal of wanting to be this successful businessman without focusing on the responsibilities of the family responsibilities that were immediate and that could not be postponed. I later also found out that there was infidelity. So there was a lot going on. And I can never speak for anyone, but what I can speak to is how it unfolded and how it impacted me. So I was going through a rough pregnancy in the sense that I was in banking. It was very high pressure, and I had recently gone to a completely new department, which was totally very high pressure and very new. But I hung in there because I knew it was important to me for it was my economic source. And with him out of a job, there is no way both of us could be unemployed. That was the unthinkable. So anyway, I made it through and I gave birth in the August of that year. And the hurricane came exactly, I was almost 5 weeks. It was just under 5 weeks. It came on when my daughter was born August 9th, and it came in September
Oh
11th, I
my.
believe. And it was catastrophic because it hit the eastern part of the island. I was living in Kingston. And so the majority of that geography of the island lost their roofs, homes demolished. And mine was no
Mm.
different. I was holding a 5-week-old baby and watching water pouring into the sunken living room. And I'm in postpartum, so I'm processing this and I'm holding this child as close as I can. I'm breastfeeding. And so you can imagine the emotional turmoil that's all going on. And just the shock of how is this going to unravel? How is this going to affect us all?
S-
Anyway,
s- So he just up and left
I'm getting
without
there.
you. Oh, okay. I'm
I'm
sorry.
getting there. Yeah, sure, I'm getting there. So we weren't able to sleep in the house that night. So I had a friend who lived on the same road, and she said to me, I'm not as badly damaged as you, so you all should come up and overnight, and we see what happens from here. So myself and the kids went and we stayed overnight with her. My mom was with me at the time, giving me support. Thank God for that. So she went to another neighbor who was a longtime family friend, and my husband hung out in the house, pretty much, to oversee until the next day. When we were able to recognize that, this was no longer a livable situation, a family member who lived in a new townhouse complex invited us to come over and stay with them because they recognized I had a 4-year old, I had a 5-week old, and by now we had no water, no electricity, no phone service. So the urgency of the need was that I needed a space where this baby could be attended to in some degree of comfort. And here's where it began to unravel. So my then husband took us over there, and you know, we're getting out of the car and going in. And I said to him, what's the plan? And we started having a quick chat. And he said to me, I'll never forget this. There are some things in your life that people tell you you never
Right.
forget. Where I am going, you can come. And so that you, I didn't take it to mean you, took it to mean you plural, yourself and your two kids.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I was so in such a shock that there is no way I could even begin to argue. My entire concentration was on my kids, especially my 5-week old, since she was solely being breastfed. And, just the fear of anything happening and, undermining the status of her health since she was born a healthy kid. So I stayed with my cousin and his wife for a couple of days. Eventually, the phone service started to come back. Those were not the days when mobiles were popular. They were probably just coming into the island. So my brother and my sister came and they collected myself, my two kids, and my mom. And so I was able to go to my mom's house and compose myself and begin to process what seemed to have been happening. So I get there, and I would say within less than 2 weeks, my now almost 6 week old, going 7 week, seemed to be having swallowing issues. My brother at the time, he had children of the same age group. So he said to me, I'll take you to my pediatrician after work and we'll let him examine her to see what exactly is happening. So we did that, and the pediatrician confirmed that she had throat ulcers, which was preventing her from swallowing. And I said to him, so what's the prescription? And he said, oh, no prescription. You'll just have to wait for a week or so for it to go away. And I'm saying, this child is barely 6 weeks old. This doesn't seem like a responsible, doesn't seem like responsible medical advice. So we left. And of course, I was crestfallen. I was gutted. And my brother said to me, well, Clover, let's go back to Kingston tomorrow. I can take you. I have other business to do, and you go to your pediatrician. We did exactly that. So when I arrived there, my pediatrician said to me, yes, she has throat ulcers, but I'm not going to handle it. So go to the ENT specialist. And he had treated my older daughter, so I knew him. So we got an appointment, and he diagnosed that that was the correct diagnosis. And of course, he gave me a prescription, including antibiotics and a tube of cream to paint the ulcers so that it would deaden them, so she could now have the peace and she would be pain-free and able to swallow. So that cleared up within a week, and she was pretty much, able to eat again and to swallow. But I remember vividly the horror and the pain of that day. She was born a healthy child, 8 pounds, 14 ounces. And I thought for a minute, if this child dies at some point, I need to have pictures of her so that I'll have a memory that she was, in fact, here with me. And I went into the photo studio and I took the pictures, and I have them to this day as a reminder of what we overcame.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, so during that time, I think I may have been able to communicate it with her dad at the time. And no, he didn't show up to the doctor's office. I barely heard from him. And so it was coming to the end of September, or about mid-September, and my 4-year-old was due for kindergarten. So the school sent a message to say we needed to find a way to bring her to school, despite the fact that they knew of my housing situation. So another family member agreed, because our godparents actually agreed that they would keep her until I returned, and I would get her every weekend and take her back to my parents where I was until the house was renovated. So the house was renovated within 3 months. And I remember the landlady at the time
had asked me to come and view the house to see if, things were in order, pretty much close to what it originally was. So I went to view it, and I had a wonderful older lady who was like a mom to me. And so I went next door to tell her hello and just to have a quick chat with her. And she said to me, I saw your husband, and he told me that he's not coming back. And I said to myself, wow, fancy him sharing that with you. And I haven't been told. So that was another crushing moment. It was a crushing moment. And so this is the beginning of the trauma of my separation and divorce that I'm
Now
hearing
let
from a.
me ask you, in terms of the trauma, what were some of the residuals of that trauma? How did you how did the trauma impact you?
Okay, so the most significant impact on my physical state was insomnia. I went through an extended period of insomnia. And trauma involves pain and grief
Yes.
because you are mourning a loss. It's no
Yes.
different from the physical loss of
Right.
of a spouse by death. It is no different. You are navigating pain, loss, and ultimately grief. And for everyone, the grief journey will look different. We
Yes.
often talk of the 5 stages of grief, but I did not go through them, right? I didn't go through the five. So the 5 stages we talk about are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance.
Yes.
Mine was shock and denial, stage one. I was in that for an extended period of time. I was in disbelief. And then there was overwhelming sadness. And with that sadness came the insomnia, and it was between shock and sadness, back and forth between shock and sadness,
Let me
until I
ask.
until I
Oh,
realized that
okay.
no one was coming to save me. People would walk the journey with me, but I would have to do the work of my healing journey.
Yes. Now let me ask you, before you reached that point, and while you were going through your sadness and your grief and your pain, how did that impact your children?
Okay, so they were extremely young.
Yes.
However, my observation and my observation is that my 0 year old, she was oblivious at the time
Right, of
to what was
course.
happening, certainly in the first year. But my 4 year old had an attachment to her dad, and I am sure she was in an emotional quandary as to what was happening. 4 year olds do not have the language to express it.
Right.
But what I do know, I ensure that she was surrounded by love because her godparents loved her, showed her, her cousins who were older, um, my own parents, myself, even though I'm navigating such pain and grief. But I remember at the time I even slept with my kids because I wanted to feel that closeness to them. And I
Yes.
wanted them to feel that closeness. So there was a season I slept with them for a long time just to feel that sense of security myself, because it goes both ways. People often think it's the children alone that needs to feel the sense of security, but you as a parent need to feel,
Absolutely.
because the sense of belonging has been lost in one part of your life.
Yes.
So you want to still know that you belong. And I want to know that my children belong to me and that I belong to them. So as I said, I slept in their room with them for an extended period of time. And
Okay. We're going to move on to this next video that talks about being traumatized. So let's share that and come back to our
So
conversation.
let me acknowledge that what was done to me has shattered me. It is heartbreaking because something we do not sufficiently say is that heartbreak from divorce and relationships in which we are invested, it is trauma. It is trauma. It is traumatic. And psychiatrists and psychologists rank the breakup of marriages between number 2 and number 3 as being one of life's most traumatic events. And the only one that's ahead is the death of a partner. So it's something that we need to recognize that we are facing a trauma.
Facing a trauma. And let me say, I too I left my husband when my son was 6 months old because of abuse. And I was not going to raise my son like that. And you also mentioned the heartbreak from that. Sometimes we don't realize how impactful that divorce or separation is. And with me, it was when I signed those divorce papers. That's when a flood of emotions came over me, knowing the finality of that situation. And so, in talking about the heartbreak and how you had to overcome that, and then you transitioned into realizing who you were. So, can you kind of speak on that?
Okay, so I'm going to speak a little bit more on the trauma.
Okay.
Maybe at the time, in real time, I did not recognize the depth of the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
But what kept me sane and stable and focused was the fact that I realized that there were two infant lives that
Yes.
depended on me, and their father was not showing up. So that was where my trauma deepened. Just the pullback and the lack of responsibility, and the absence, the just not showing up. It was what I call, and I refer to it in my chapter um, in the book, as check-in parenting. He was just checking in basically to see that they were alive. I'm your dad. I'm just checking in here to see that they're alive. However, however, the what the children needed was way, way, way more than that. And I had to build that capacity to give it to them. There was an absent father. He was showing up occasionally. He was not providing financially. He was verbally abusive to me. He was willful in wanting negative things to happen. And I'll give an example. So when we returned home, my mom was still with me because she thought I needed the additional support, and I needed it because I was back at
Yes.
work. There was still a 3 4 month old baby, and I was very grateful for that. So he would tend to come when I was at work. Never forgotten what she shared with me. She said, imagine, I am so upset because she had loaned me her car because we only had one car for the family. So he had taken the car and she had loaned me her car. And she said to me, I can't believe what he told me today. He said he can't wait for her to take back her car from me so that my friends can laugh at me. Now, I am the one, yes, so that my friends can laugh at me. So imagine the father of your children wanting the worst for you when you are the source of physical, emotional, and financial nurture and care.
Um, that brings me to the next video because we're talking about emotionally unavailability in essence. So let me pull this up.
Right. And
So it's something that we need to recognize that we are facing a trauma. And when you face trauma, remember, if you went out and you had an accident and you had legs broken in two places, hands broken, internal bleeding, you would be taken to the intensive care. So what you need now is emotional intensive care. And that is your self care and self compassion. It is not about shame and or fear. Those two emotions, they are so negative. They do not move you forward.
So let me ask you, what were some things, given all the responsibilities that you had, the fact that you went back to work full time, you did have your mother's support, and thank God for your mother. What kinds of things did you do to care for yourself emotionally? And I know that you said your children were surrounded with love, which is an emotional support. So, what did you do to heal yourself?
okay, so before the last video played, I wanted to say that we also need to recognize that neglect of your children is emotional abuse. Both
Yes,
of
it
your children,
is.
both of your children and your partner, because that person is watching in real time and feeling that pain on behalf of the children. And I felt it. And I'll talk maybe a little bit more about this, but disenfranchised grief, that you are re triggered throughout the relationship, even after divorce, because of how the relationship is evolving and the lack of care and kindness that often shows up from inadequate emotional engagement with the kids. Yes, the default emotions that we face at breakup and separation are fear and shame. Why? We are afraid of the unknown. We had hoped nobody goes into a marriage thinking that it is going to be over. And not only is it going to be over, but your children are not going to be parented in the way that you expected them to be parented. Because I've always said it, you can divorce a partner, but you should not divorce your children. Children get
Absolutely.
one mother and one father. And therefore, the weight of that responsibility should stay with you at least until they become adults. So that carried additional weight to my trauma experience because it represented the antithetical model of how I was raised. I was
Yes,
raised with two
exactly.
parents. Yes. So
It-
it was trauma compounded and cognitive dissonance. How is this happening to me? Kind of thing.
you're
Um,
right.
you know, you're
Ex-
adjusting um, my childhood experience to what is not going to happen to my children. So I was
exactly.
constantly having flashbacks. And
Let me
that,
ask you, there's a couple questions I want to ask you.
sure.
When you decided to marry your husband, were there some flags or triggers that might have suggested some things to you prior to you marrying him?
Okay, here's what I will say. And I've often thought about this. When you are getting married at in your 20s, 25, 30, whatever age you're getting married, especially when you have come from a traditional nuclear family where there was total commitment.
Hmm.
There was never going to be a divorce between my mom and dad. That was never ever going to happen. Right? It was never going to happen. So that socialization spilled over into my own thinking. However, what I will say is that looking back, when you have some life experience, you realize that there were a few red flags. However, you did not have the life experience or the knowledge to
Right.
recognize them as red flags. And
But
oftentimes,
what I would
people
like,
will grow up and change.
true. However, sometimes because I there were red flags. In fact, the day I got married, I heard loud and clear, "You should not be doing this," but I did it anyway. And so that was a choice that I made, and the consequences thereof. But in looking at and to kind of help our audience in some way identify s- flags that we, now that we're older, we recognize what those flags were. But when we are in it or we're younger, we don't see those flags. So just to kind of help a young person that may be engaged in a relationship, thinking about marriage, and there may be some things that they might want to look at. What kinds of flags would you have wish you had been more cognizant of?
All right, so there are two that immediately come to mind. He was from a completely different background. So his parents were never married, but it does not mean that he could not have been a good spouse. However, I think there were negative experiences with step parents, and that caused him some what I call buried pain, unprocessed pain that he didn't process it, and he carried that over. And your marriage cannot validate you if you are carrying pain. You have to work through that
Absolutely.
pain, because you will now conflate what happened in your past with what is happening and misconstrue it.
Absolutely. And in fact, he is one of those statistics. 60% of adults who have unresolved issues, it stems from their childhood. And unless we recognize what those things are, which he clearly did not deal with his unresolved issues, and it carried over into your marriage. And so understanding that piece is also very important. Now, I wanted, so have you, when your children, because your children are grown now, right?
They're grown
Um,
now. But if
but
I could
when,
just pick up on the other point that you asked me about, the other one was the gender stereotypes. So this was not someone who saw himself in equal parenting, in the sense that he was stuck in that stereotype of dad as provider. And what you do when you get stuck in stereotypes is that you facilitate emotional overload of one person. And so he never changed a diaper. Never. Never cleaned a bum. No personal care chore.
because he
Never.
didn't
Never.
know, he didn't know.
Never. I don't think it's something that people need to know. Once you have a child, you have to recognize that you have got to take on every aspect of the responsibility,
That's very
right?
true. However, if you have not, if you've not been raised in that kind of environment and you've not seen it in action, then that ignorance is there because of lack of knowledge, not being able to experience it. And there are a lot of not only fathers, but there are mothers also who don't have that nurturing understanding of how to make a marriage make it so that it's not equal, but at least participatory in all aspects.
Yes, make it more egalitarian, right? So
Yes,
if mom
yes.
if mom is in the bathroom having a shower and the baby is crying and needs to be changed, yes, dad can pick the baby up change the baby. I agree. It's not equal in the sense that we are measuring, but it is filling in the parental role,
Absolutely.
right? Without being stuck in a gender frame. And
Absolutely.
he was definitely stuck in a gender frame, and he was also overwhelmingly focused on the need to become the successful entrepreneur, um, to for self-aggrandizement more than anything else. It was not to be the best husband or to take care of the family, but it was really for personal achievement, right?
Exactly. Now let
So
me,
I
okay.
wanted to pivot back though to the point you had raised earlier about the self-care and self-compassion and how I got through
Yes.
that. And that's really important. And it was really important to my resilience and recovery. So, okay, so I realized it took me from separation to divorce was 5 years. And in that period, there was limited financial support. There was no regularity of financial, emotional, or
Right.
physical in terms of showing up to run to the pharmacy for them or anything like that. So I recognized that this was my journey, and this journey was going to be disproportionate in terms of the parenting roles. I was very fortunate, extremely fortunate, to still have had my parents living. So they were praying for me, they were cheering me on. I had, and still do, I have two older sisters who were also cheering for me. And one of them in particular, she was physically involved in the sense that my kids, as they got older, they would spend lots of summertime with her and their grandparents because they lived in the same area. So that was a big relief for me in terms of breathing space because I could not rely on their father to take them for shared parenting time or overnight. That never happened, despite one of my children actually crying and saying, "Why does dad say he's going to take us for a weekend and he never shows up?"
And how did you
So
respond to that? How did you respond to that? When they do said that to you, how did you respond?
I just hugged her as she cried because there was no way. What could I say? I couldn't vouch for somebody who is saying something and is not honoring it. So my heart broke. My heart broke with empathy. And again, this is where you're constantly triggered and the disenfranchised grief comes in again. And you go
Yeah.
through the grieving process all again. Also, my faith. I could never not speak about my faith. So I had what I call my Whoville, and everybody has their community of family and friends that will show up for you. And this is why I say to people, ditch the shame and ditch the fear. Each one of us has a community of people, whether it's friends, whether it's siblings, extended family. There are people who will show up for you. And I had that. It was not a large group, but it was a committed group of people who were always checking in. And I had a friend in particular, still my friend now, who was a woman of faith. And we had met in the job that I was in at the time. And she would take me to prayer meetings. She would take me to Women's Aglow Fellowship when it was Women's Aglow. It's now a Glow Fellowship. And I was surrounded by a prayer wall. And I believe that had a tremendous impact on my
Absolutely.
resilience, right? And
Absolutely.
I too built my relationship with Christ. It became a focus because I knew I could not do it on my own. And
Now,
so that became I can do all things through Christ Jesus who strengthens me because I know
absolutely.
what I was not operating on my own strength. I definitely wasn't. It was
So
coming from a divine source.
I understand. And if it wasn't for faith, a lot of people would just not know what to do. And we got people like that right
Absolutely.
now. But
Right.
in addition to your
One point, the other thing I took up, which was walking.
Okay.
walking, because exercise is absolutely important. And some people may say, oh, I have to go to the gym or I have to go to water aerobics. You just need to take up an activity that is going to relax you, that is going to be improve your health, mental and physical health. And walking releases endorphins. So it was helping
Yes.
my feel good status. And I was also losing weight because I was doing it 5 days a week and I was doing it for an extended period. And so that really helped to um, increase my own feeling of well being.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
it actually was a miracle working factor in my own
Fantastic.
well-being. So those
Fantastic.
were actually my go-to self-care and compassion, as well as trying to eat right and the other, the other things we do for
Awesome.
ourselves daily.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, the co-parenting piece. You are a co-parenting coach. So, and before I even share that, my brother, he was a single dad of four children after his divorce. However, the relationship between him and his ex-wife was exemplary. They co-parented in ways unlike most. He just recently died December 20th, but and his kids are grown now. But that co-parenting piece is so critical because it impacts it can cause irreparable damage to your kids depending on how it's handled. So, as
Absolutely.
a co-parenting coach, what are some key things that you can share as it relates to dealing with co-parenting and dealing with maybe someone that may not be emotionally intelligent and has unresolved issues, but is necessary in a relationship or in that relationship with their kids. So, can you kind of share some of your philosophy?
Okay, so absolutely. You can divorce your spouse, you can leave your spouse, but you should not divorce your children. The challenge of co-parenting is that there is a feeling of rejection for the person who has been left behind. But I have also been told by many that even though they did not initiate the divorce, they still feel the pain and the void of, of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And there are three, what I call the three V's of co parenting, and I want to just talk about them: the violence, the volatility, and the void. Many of us are not aware that the co parenting space is a space of a variation of violence. And that violence starts from um, disrespectful texts with expletives to verbal abuse, which could be shouting, it could be on the phone, it could be in person, but it ranges up to murder.
What were those
And
three again? Violence, volatility, and what was the third
and the
one?
void, the
Void.
violence, the volatility, and the void.
Okay.
So the violence covers a wide spectrum,
Now
but it is frightening.
you're talking about after the divorce.
I'm focusing on after the divorce, especially during custody issues, because that is where the emotions begin to get real unruly, right? So that is something I want to point out. The other is the volatility, and the volatility has to do with the lack of control we have over our emotions. And for a season, many of us are reactive instead of being responsive. And the difference between being reactive and responsive is that when we respond to something, it's a planned and thought through
Mm-hmm.
idea or thought, whatever, however it is going to be communicated. But reactive, it's just about anything goes. You say anything, you do anything. And you may even do it in front of your children. And
Which is a
that is,
no-no.
which is a no no. And the void is the feeling of emptiness that we feel after breakup. And everybody goes through that because it is part of the grieving process. And even if you are not the person initiating it, there is an emptiness in which we all question ourselves about why this happened, what we could have done better, or whose fault is it, and who is to blame. And
Right.
recognizing these three will help all of us to decide how we process um, moving forward with the relationship now as caregivers, because you are no longer lovers. You have
Right.
changed your status from lovers to caregivers.
Right.
And
Now let me
what,
say,
one second, one of my mantras is that you need to love your children more than you hate your ex. And if you can hang on to that mantra and let it be your guiding light, you will be moving in a positive direction.
a couple of things. One, um, the focus on the negatives of co-parenting does not have to exist.
No.
And oftentimes, co-parenting, if we can give some nuggets on positive co-parenting, I don't think I mean, there may be relationships where after divorce you got violence, volatility, and void. The void is going to be there, needless to say. But not all co-parenting situations involve violence and volatility. And so being able to focus on what, if I am in a co-parenting situation, how can I make it amenable so that my children don't see the violence, the volatility, and what kinds of things can we do? And I mean, one of the things,
Cooperation.
cooperation,
Cooperation
absolutely,
and communication should be the focus of any healthy co-parenting relationship. But here
absolutely,
are a few ground rules. The first ground rule is never badmouth your
absolutely,
the mother or father of your children, because
absolutely,
that is who they are now, the mother and father of your children. That's the first ground rule, and try to keep that ground rule.
absolutely,
Whatever,
absolutely,
yeah, whatever the frustration, do it in a closed environment where they,
absolutely.
yeah. The
Don't
other one
argue in
is,
front of your children.
no, right. The other one is, don't move halfway around the world to spite the other parents. Stay within 20 to 30 minutes distance by car.
Well,
So that, because now here's let me explain what I mean. The children have already suffered immense emotional disruption from the household. And if you move them, unless there is violence or some dysfunction like that, the children, depending on their ages, they already have a school community, they already have a recreational community. And if you pull them away from where the spaces, social spaces in which they are already connected, it is going to further undermine their sense of security and well being.
okay, I want to respond to that
Sure.
because, for example, when my ex-husband and I split, my son was 6 months old. He left and moved to another state. I was in California. He moved to Georgia. Um, and there was no communications with my son as a toddler. When I moved to Ohio, and because I did not have a relationship with my biological father, I felt it was very important that my son have some kind of relationship with his dad. And even with him being out of state, one of what we did, we exchanged school year summers. You know, he would spend one school year with his dad and the next school year with me, and the summer with his dad, and vice versa. So we did that up until fifth grade, because I agree with you. You should never badmouth the other. You should, and I stood firm. It was not my job to insinuate my child into my personal adult issues with my ex-husband. And
Yeah.
it was important that he had a relationship with his father, and for him to determine for himself if,
Absolutely.
and so, and he did. Fifth grade, he came back and said, Mom, I don't ever want to live with my dad again,
There you go.
and he didn't. But he has a relationship with his dad. He does. But it's just so sometimes circumstances may be that it's just not um, conducive to have both parents in the same space. If
Absolutely. There has to be flexibility. There has to be
yes,
flexibility. And everything is dependent on the personal circumstances at the time as well as
yes,
the age of the child.
yes,
However, another one that I think is very important, especially to overcome gender barriers, and of course, this has to do, it varies with the age of the child. Children must get shared parenting time. In other words, the same time allotted to mom should be allotted to dad. And that should be worked out in an equitable manner. And as two adults, it should be able to happen so that neither parent suffers the overwhelm and the overload. Because inevitably, if it's not shared equitably, one parent is going to face the overload. That's for sure. The other one I would say is, because of the changed nature of the relationship, there needs to be a new way of communicating.
absolutely,
And I refer to what I call couples communication. And you are not going to couples communication together, or are you doing it for yourself? But you need a new neutral way of communicating to each other about your child. And that language does not come naturally to us after we have evolved from lovers to caregivers. And you still need a language that speaks of we as parents, right? So that's a completely different language from when mom and dad were living together as man and wife or as lovers. So
absolutely,
there is a change in the communication and it doesn't come naturally. And therefore, we need to get help in this area so that the language is neutral and non abusive. And that is
absolutely.
very important
And
because I
abusive
have seen that
language.
over and over again. And abusive
Yes,
language ranges from the text that sometimes people are unwilling to open. Um, and so I will share what I call the 5 C's of communication that we should
well,
be
we
guided
need
by.
to do it quick because we're almost out of
Yes, we
time.
have to. It must be child centered. So the communication must focus on the child, no one else, to minimize conflict. We must communicate whatever it is we are discussing with flexibility. We are going to have differences, but our role as parents is to suggest options in terms of what alternatives when there is a problem and how we can fix that. Calm, focus on calm to reduce stress and manage our emotions,
Absolutely.
right? And try to contain escalation. It's very important for the emotional safety of our kids, and focus on agreements that answer the question who, what, when, and where. And when we answer the question, we commit to it
Okay, we
as
got to
mature
go.
adults.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. And there's a lot that can be unpacked by this conversation. We've ran out of time. I do appreciate you being on my show. And with that, we're going to say good night. And we will see you again on Tuesday. Everyone have a great weekend. And if you could hold on for a minute as I close out. Okay. Oh, it's not letting me. Okay. I just want to thank my guests for being here tonight, and I want to say to each of you, remember, co-parenting is a major issue of concern because it's not about you, and it's not about the child. I mean, it's not about you, and it's not about the other parent. It's all about the child. It's all about the child and the children. That should be the main focus where co-parenting is concerned. It's all about the kids. So God bless you, and we'll see you again next week.
The Vera